Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. How can the widening fault lines of Nigeria and the spreading sense of fear in the land be brought under control? Can the self-inflicted wounds ever heal? Are we giving ourselves a chance of reaching a compromise? Could we ever have a chance of convening a meaningful process in Nigeria on all fronts? What can we really do about Nigeria to move it forward? And what should President Buhari do in a second time to stop the seeming slide into anarchy? These are some of the questions nagging the minds of many Nigerians as the nation waits with bated breath for the president to embark on a second term in office. For this and a number of other issues, we are now being joined by Professor Chidi Odinkalu, former chairman of the Nigerian Human Rights Commission. Chidi, welcome to the program. Good morning, Chidi.
Thank you very much, Ruben, and,
Great.
And welcome from sabbatical.
Thank you. Well, let me start with something else entirely. Today has been declared the National Day of Mourning by a number of civil society groups, and there's likely to be, public events across Nigeria. And I see you are wearing black. What is the significance of this, National Mourning Day that you and others have declared? Is it that Nigerian lives matter? Is that what you are saying? Is it that everybody is somebody? What exactly is the message?
Indeed, that's the point. We can't continue to be a country that loses people that we refuse to acknowledge, and our leaders behave as if it's normal to bleed our citizens like manure. At some point, Nigerian lives have got to be acknowledged, and we have political leaders to stop our citizens from being slaughtered the way we're being slaughtered. The Inspector General of Police just told us 2 weeks ago that 1,069 Nigerians were killed in the first quarter alone, and another 685 were abducted and not accounted for. Some of them were ransomed. Now, that's too many, and the politicians don't seem to be doing anything to bring this to an end. On the contrary, many of them are behaving either as if it's normal or as if Nigerian lives are expendable. And part of the symbolism of having a National Day of Mourning the day before our Democracy Day is to remind these politicians that every Nigerian life that we lose is worth something, and they need to do something to reaffirm faith in Nigerian life.
Absolutely, sir. That's a point that definitely cannot be agreed on more. We do need to ensure that the government is aware of the fact that Nigerians are dying in numbers innocently, and clearly that should not be. Now, of course, this is a problem that has developed over the years, a problem that we've seen going on, yet with every government that seems to come in, and with the amounts of security policies that are spoken about, we still seem to see these problems in existence. It's one thing to clear a problem, it's another thing for that problem to no longer be one of Nigeria's issues. What exactly should we be looking towards over the next 4 years and the last 4 years of the Buhari administration with regards to security? When the president came in 2015, one of his greatest points that he was pushing on was security around the country. Yet the numbers that you just gave us of 1,069 people in the first quarter alone is absolutely heinous. So what exactly should we be looking at over the next 4 years?
Well, I wish I were in a position to tell you what we should be looking at. The president ran for office. He promised us he would take us to the next level. Of course, that assumes that we know what the previous level looked like. But there are some things that could easily change. First of all, when President Buhari came to office in 2015, we were told that his body language could brew tea, and his body language could impregnate, could inseminate people who were having fertility problems, and his body language could sort out everything. Well, his body language quite clearly now is that Nigerian lives don't matter. So he could begin by changing his body language and make his body language transmit the message that Nigerian lives matter. He could begin to transmit the message that he takes his fight against corruption seriously. So when a Governor Ganduje is accused of babaringaing $5 million of ill-gotten money, the president should not be conducting himself as if that does not matter simply because he thinks Kano is important to his electoral calculus. It's those kinds of things that will give people faith that this is a president for everybody, not a president for some people only. Because when he took office, he told us he was for nobody and he was for everybody. But it's quite clear that he's for some people and for some people alone. Now, he needs to change that. That's the first thing that needs to go. Secondly, he needs to change the service chiefs. We've had them enough. They've been there for 5 years, 4 years. That's long enough. They've done their bit. They've served the country well. But their best is not good enough. Under their watch, Nigerians, when in 2015, we had a problem in one geopolitical zone in Nigeria, the Northeast. Today, we have problems in the Northeast, the Northwest, the North Central, cults everywhere, thugs everywhere, guns running amok, to the point where we're now being told they need an executive order to mop up guns. That is just not right. And when you look at the metrics, everything suggests they have not done well, and we should not mollycoddle them. There needs to be a price for non-performance, and part of the problem under President Buhari is that it does not appear as if there is any consequence for non-performance. If you don't perform, you get a second term, you get a third term. That needs to end. The only exception to this is the current Inspector General of Police. He is new, and he appears to be different from his predecessor. He deserves to be given a chance to prove himself. But other than him, all the service chiefs should go. If we can begin from that, we don't need 4 years to do that. It can happen today. It can happen tomorrow. If those can begin, then let us see what happens thereafter. But right now, it's just not good enough.
Well, Chidi, still on the issue of security, I recall that you had some issue with the Kaduna state government over the number of persons who were killed in a section of Kaduna state, and the state government went to court. The Attorney General in that state went to court. And I understand yesterday you were invited by the police headquarters in Abuja for interrogation. You were accused of having questioned some number of persons who died, or maybe you quoted some numbers that could incite public disturbance. What was your experience with the police yesterday, and what is this whole issue all about?
Yes, it's accurate that I was, in fact, a guest of the police yesterday, and I've got to say they treated me with utmost courtesy and decency. I have utmost respect for the way they're handling the situation. I think all of us now are in the age where we have to take the responsibility of leadership seriously. And the facts, I think, are quite clear of what transpired. On the 16th of last month was, the 16th of February was the day originally scheduled for our presidential elections. On the 15th, that was the Friday before that 16th, which was a Saturday, the governor of Kaduna State took to the tubes to announce that, in quotes, 66 Fulanis had been killed in a particular part of the state. Now, you just have to pause to understand the significance of this. First of all, to determine that 66 people have been killed of any alone takes a lot of time. To determine that 66 people of a particular ethnic origin have been killed requires a level of forensic application that doesn't exist at this particular time in Nigeria, because we don't even have the forensic pathology resources to make that determination. When you micro-identify a pathology of killing to an ethnic identity, it takes a particular will to incite a people. That is not the role of a governor. And to do that on the eve of an election, I will continue to insist, is particularly irresponsible. I will insist on that until the day I die. If you have a gun to my head, I will continue to say so. That is the question, and that is a point I'm not willing to back down on. Nigerian lives must be seen to matter. I'm no politician. has a right to go to office on the blood of innocent Nigerians. By all means, let people fight their political battles. But we've got to draw a line somewhere. And that somewhere has to be Nigerian lives must matter. I don't care which part of Nigeria they come from. I don't worry about the ethnicity. I'm not interested in their gender. Nigerian lives must matter. When a politician on a Friday, the day before a general election, does this kind of thing, we all have a duty to call them out, and we must be prepared to pay a price for doing so.
Absolutely, sir. And it's great that at the end of the day, we can stand for something here. And to be honest, that is a point that is very difficult to fault. Now, the Kaduna state government responded and they accused you of 4 different offenses, including stuff such as public nuisance, etc., and things that you wouldn't necessarily quote to a human rights activist trying to take a stand for people of his country. But this continuous spreading sense of fear seems to be an ongoing issue, no matter who you are and what you're trying to achieve here. Now, where exactly do you think this spreading sense of fear is stemming from? And how can our community leaders, if we really want to start with change at home, start to influence our people and start to influence citizens in different communities so that we can start to halt this sense of fear?
Look, citizenship is a huge office, and nobody wins citizenship for free. I was listening to Comrade Aremu in the segment before I came here talk about the people who fought for independence, and he talked about our politicians in NCNC and Action Group and the NPC and all of that, and he forgot Nigerian people. The Egba women who chased away Obademola were not members of any political party. They were ordinary citizens. The miners killed in Iva Valley 70 years ago, November 1949, 21 of them were citizens. They did not belong to political parties. The women in Aba who protested against arbitrary taxation were citizens, not political parties. The people of Lagos who did the water riot, so-called, the demonstration against arbitrary taxation by the pre-colonial rulers, white folks in 1908, were citizens, not political parties. And it takes citizens to build a country. And from these examples I've given, it also takes something else. It takes sacrifice. And we've got to be willing to sacrifice for being Nigerian. It's an honor to be a Nigerian. It's a privilege to be a Nigerian. And we've got to work hard at being Nigerians, and not Nigerians only for our villages, of our church or mosque groups, of our ethnicities. Nigerians for a country that does matter and does count. Because if this country goes belly up, it will be awful for our continent. And it's not going to be awful for 1 or 2 of us. It's for everybody. Nigeria is not going to break up peacefully. So why does anybody not wish the country well? Or why should anybody not wish the country well? That is the issue I can't understand, particularly people who claim political office and who claim the privilege of public service. That's what I can't understand. We cannot continue to be afraid. We did not escort anybody to this country, you know. Every citizen is equal. None of us here is an observer of citizenship. Every one of us has got an obligation to stand up when this country is threatened, when our neighborhoods are threatened by politicians who are irresponsible. And we've got to be willing to pay a price for that. That's really my view. There's nothing else we can do. Nobody's going to chase us from this country. They deported Shugaba in 1981. The Supreme Court told us that you cannot deport Nigerian citizens. Full stop. So we're here to stay until we die. This is where it's going to end. And this is where it's got to end.
Well, on the issue of security...
People should stop getting frightened of politicians. They will be there for no more than for 8 years.
Well, still on the issue of security, I mean, we started this program this morning with a videotape of the interview that the president granted to NTA, to the media, yesterday, and that was aired. In that interview, the president was saying, look, he thinks about security 24 hours, and that he's committed to pushing, the police and the judiciary to be more efficient. And he also talked about the citizen. He says community leaders have a role to play. He says, the ordinary Nigerians, the people who want security, they also have a role to play by fishing out the criminals in their midst and by doing their own bit. Do you trust him? Do you believe him on all of these issues?
I believe it was President Reagan who advised that we should trust and verify. I have no problem trusting the president. I have a duty to verify what he says. When he says that he thinks about security 24 hours every day, I don't have any reason not to believe him. I'm not in his head. But I don't have any evidence to show that he thinks about security 24 hours every day. That is the problem. There is a dissonance between what he appears to say and the evidence on the ground. And the evidence is that when Nigerians are killed, when foreigners are killed, I mean, in Kajuru, 2 months ago, we had 2 Nigerians killed, 2 people killed. One was Feimuni, who is Brit, white. The other was Matthew Oguche, who is Nigerian and black. What happened? All our leaders, including the presidency, fell over themselves to condole with Faye and condole with her family, rightfully so. But none of them remembered that there was a Nigerian who was killed whose name was Matthew Oguche and whose family also deserves to be acknowledged. And I'm actually told that Matthew's father has written a letter to the president since last month. That letter has not been acknowledged. What about doing just basic things? Acknowledge the letter by Matthew's father. And Matthew's father, by the way, is a supporter of APC and a campaigner for APC. If the father of a political supporter of the president writes to him about the killing of his son and cannot get a response, what do you expect people who are not known to be supporters of the president to get? By the way, we also have the story of the Magajingari Daura, who was abducted last month, who's not been found, earlier this month, I believe, and who's not been found, and about whom the spokespersons for the president say they've not done much because, and that's because they are showing that the president does not discriminate about these matters. And I ask the question, if the president cannot lift a finger to find Magajingari Daura, his own village, is it the Magajingari of my village in the southeast of Nigeria, assuming there is one, that he is going to lift a finger for? This is the problem. I don't want to know what is in his head 24 hours. I want to know what he does and how he does it. I want to know that when 73 Nigerians are being buried in Benue State, he shows up, and he shows up, and he shows that he cares. I want to know that when 52 Nigerians are killed in Lao, he shows up and he shows that he cares. I want to know that when Nigerians are burnt in Plateau, the president is present. At the moment, there is no evidence of that. That is fact.
Absolutely, sir. That is certainly a point that, once again, is quite hard to deny based on proof and based on evidence, as you said. So this is an ongoing problem that we're seeing, and this is something that we're definitely trying to tackle. And if we bring it back, to the citizens of the country, what message would you pass across as a human rights activist to Nigerians who may be living in a sense of fear or may not necessarily feel sure about their security going into a second term now under the Buhari administration? What would you have to say?
Well, citizenship is a responsibility, and it comes with obligations, including obligations to make demands. And when those demands are well-founded, not to back down on those demands. The National Day of Mourning is a demand-making movement. Today, we are having Nigerians across the board, in every state of Nigeria, have National Day of Mourning events. We have people closing down their offices. Enough is enough. In Lagos, for instance, it's shut down its offices today in memory of Nigerians. We are having people closing offices in Rivers State, in Cross River State, in Zamfara State, in Akwa Ibom, in Yobe State, in Borno State, just because we've lost too many people and they want to make the point. That is where it begins. Citizen movements, rediscovering our shared bonds. Because politicians in this country want to tell us that we are north and south, east and west, Yoruba, Igbo, Efik, Ibibio, Berom, Fulani, Afizere. We all hate one another, and we will never be able to live together. The reality is that every day Nigerians are living together and proving the politicians wrong. Nigerians are showing a desire to come together and to bond. We are intermarrying. We are rushing one another to hospital when we are in danger. We are contributing money, GoFundMe and all of that, to make sure that people are saved. We are paying school fees for children whose parents we don't know. We're picking up kids from the streets and making sure they're not in danger. Those acts of generosity, of shared citizenship, of shared bonds are always forgotten. And politicians want to take a knife and cut us apart and cut us to bits. We have a duty to stop them. And in the ways that we show and share that we care for one another and care for the country and care for our neighborhoods, we can. That has to be the way of the future. It doesn't lie in the hands of our politicians. It lies in our hands as citizens to force them, even against their will, to understand that we have a bigger project here than their brief ambitions for 4 or 8 years.
Well, talking about citizens, recently we were told that the federal government is planning to set up a radio station for the Fulani that will broadcast in Fulfulde. And we had a gentleman here on this program who said, well, you know, this could truly be used as a tool for social mobilization and education. There are others who have said, well, this could have implications for national security if you single out just one ethnic group to promote one particular language, and then you hide that under the umbrella of nomadic education. What's your take on this controversial so-called Fulani radio?
I started off actually not believing that initially because it's so wrong-headed. I just think it's plainly wrong and off. Look, this year, in July this year, it will be 10 years since the Boko Haram problem began, since the killing of Mohammed Yusuf, who was killed in July, extrajudicially executed in July 2009. And we had problems. I mean, Ruben, you may remember, under the president whom you served, the Galtimari Committee, and Gaji Galtimari just died earlier this year. The Galtimari Committee was set up in 2011 to examine the Boko Haram problem. And at no point did anybody think that we needed to set up a Kanuri radio to broadcast to Kanuris or to the populations of the Northeast and tell them, for the federal government to do that. We've had an issue with the indigenous peoples of Biafra in the Southeast. Nobody at any point talked about an Igbo radio. By the way, before that, we had...
I thought there was Radio Biafra.
Gani Adams and OPC. No, the federal government never set up Igbo radio. Did it? Nobody's suggesting that Nnamdi Kanu's Radio Biafra is legitimate or legal or lawful. Now, but we had Gani Adams and OPC, and nobody talked about Yoruba radio. Now, once you start this idea of ethnic radio stations owned by government, at the federal level at that, there will be no end to the problems you will start. I think it is totally, awfully wrong. By the way, we have frequencies that can accomplish those problems. The FRCN has enough frequencies to be able to accommodate any needs to outreach any particular communities. The armed forces also have frequencies, and security services have frequencies to be able to do that. This is gratuitous at best, in my view.
Well, thank you very much, Chidi Odinkalu, and all the best with the program today to remind Nigerians and government that Nigerian lives indeed matter. Thank you very much. It's time now for a short break on the morning show. When we return, we'll have Arise News analyst Emmanuel Efene join us to review top stories in today's newspapers. Stay with us.